The photograph had been hidden behind that wall for 37 years, and the moment I saw it, I understood why some people in this family had spent decades pretending the past no longer existed. It happened on a gray October afternoon inside the Harrison estate, the kind of afternoon when the sky seemed to press against the tall windows and every room felt heavier than usual. James, our loyal house manager, had been overseeing repairs near the old stone fireplace in the west sitting room. The house was nearly a century old, and unexpected discoveries were not uncommon. But this was different. I was sitting alone with a cup of tea when he appeared in the doorway holding a dusty envelope with both hands. His expression told me everything before he spoke a single word. "Mrs. Harrison," he said quietly, "I think you should see this." I followed him down the hallway, my cardigan wrapped tightly around my shoulders. The scent of old wood and plaster lingered in the air. Behind a loose panel near the fireplace, hidden between the walls, was a narrow compartment. Inside had been a single envelope and one photograph. Nothing more. James handed me the picture. For a moment, I simply stared. The room seemed to fall silent around me. The face looking back at me was one I had not seen in decades. A face that should never have been there. A face connected to a chapter of the Harrison family history that had been buried so deeply, even speaking about it had become unthinkable. My hands trembled slightly, but I forced myself to remain calm. Across the photograph, written in faded blue ink, were 4 words. I remembered those words instantly. I remembered who wrote them, and I remembered the promise that followed. Upstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 4 times. The sound echoed through the house like a warning. That evening, the entire family gathered for dinner beneath the crystal chandelier in the massive dining room. Harrison sat silently at the far end of the long oak table. Isabel poured wine beside David with effortless elegance. Ethan watched everyone carefully from his seat near the staircase entrance. No one noticed how quiet I had become. No one noticed the photograph folded inside my pocket. Isabel smiled as though she controlled every piece on the board. Perhaps she believed she did. I smiled back and said nothing. Because for the first time in many years, the past had started moving again, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it reached the people who feared it most. I did not sleep much that night. The photograph remained on my bedside table, tucked inside the envelope James had found, yet it felt as though it occupied the entire room. Outside, the wind moved through the old maple trees that lined the Harrison property, brushing against the windows with a soft whisper. I sat awake in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling around me. Some people believe old homes carry memories. After living here for more than 40 years, I had learned that they do. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and made my way downstairs. The kitchen was empty. The coffee tasted stronger than usual, or perhaps I was simply more aware of everything. Across the courtyard, I could see James already beginning his day. He glanced toward the window and gave me a respectful nod. Neither of us mentioned what had been found. We did not need to. By noon, the house had returned to its usual rhythm. Isabel was hosting one of her informal family lunches in the sunroom. She moved effortlessly between conversations, smiling at guests, directing staff, and making every decision appear natural. People often mistook her confidence for generosity. I had once made the same mistake. David arrived late, carrying the weight of responsibilities that never seemed to leave his shoulders. He looked tired. Ethan followed shortly after, greeting everyone before settling into a quiet corner with his laptop. He had always been observant. Even as a child, he noticed details others ignored. During lunch, I caught him studying me more than once, noticing my silence, noticing the way Isabel occasionally glanced in my direction. Small things, the kind of things most people miss. Later that afternoon, Thomas called. His voice remained calm, but there was an urgency beneath it. He asked if we could meet privately the following day. When I asked why, he paused for several seconds. "There is a file," he finally said. "A file I believed was destroyed many years ago." I stared out the window toward the distant oak trees. The photograph suddenly felt heavier inside my pocket. "And now?" I asked. Thomas exhaled slowly. "Now I think someone worked very hard to make sure nobody ever found it." After the call ended, I remained standing there for a long time. Across the room, Isabel laughed at something David had said. Her smile was polished and flawless. Yet for the briefest moment, our eyes met. Something changed in her expression. Only for a second, barely noticeable. but it was enough. For the first time, I wondered whether she already knew that the past had begun finding its way back into this house. Thomas asked me to meet him at his office the next morning, and by the time I arrived, I could already tell something was wrong. His receptionist greeted me warmly, but there was tension in the air that had not been there during previous visits. The office had always felt steady and predictable, much like Thomas himself. That day, it felt different. He was waiting behind his desk when I entered, a thick folder resting in front of him. For several moments, neither of us spoke. He simply removed his glasses and looked at me with the expression of a man carrying information he wished he did not possess. Finally, he slid the folder across the desk. "I found this in an archived storage unit outside Boston," he said quietly. "It should not exist." I opened the folder carefully. Inside were copies of legal documents, handwritten notes, and several photographs. One of those photographs matched the one James had discovered behind the wall. My pulse quickened. The same face, the same handwriting, the same date, 1987. I turned another page and froze. A name appeared that I had not seen in decades. A name deliberately removed from family conversations. A name that had vanished from records so completely that most people would never know it had existed. "Who else has seen this?" I asked. Thomas shook his head. "Only me. And now you." He leaned forward. "Eleanor, somebody spent years making sure these records disappeared. Bank documents were altered. Property transfers were rewritten. Entire files vanished from county archives." I looked down at the papers again. The deeper I read, the more impossible everything seemed. Pieces of history I thought I understood no longer fit together. Events I remembered clearly suddenly carried entirely different meanings. On my drive home, the autumn sky hung low over the highway. I kept replaying conversations from years ago. Small moments, strange decisions, unanswered questions, things I had dismissed because I trusted the people around me. By the time I reached the Harrison estate, evening shadows stretched across the lawn. Inside, the house appeared calm as always. Isabel was speaking with David near the fireplace. Ethan sat nearby reading through financial reports on his tablet. James greeted me at the door. I smiled politely and carried the folder upstairs without a word. Later that night, as I reviewed the documents again, a single page slipped loose from the stack. At the bottom was a signature. The moment I recognized the handwriting, every remaining doubt disappeared. Someone inside this family had known the truth all along. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom long after the rest of the house had gone quiet. The folder remained open on the small writing desk near the window. I read the signature again and again, hoping I had somehow misunderstood what was in front of me. I had not. The handwriting belonged to someone I had trusted for years. Someone who had looked me in the eye countless times while carrying a truth that could have changed everything. Sleep never came. Instead, memories arrived. Small moments I had ignored. Conversations that ended too quickly whenever certain subjects appeared. Documents that were always handled by the same people. Family meetings where decisions seemed to have been made long before anyone entered the room. For years I had accepted those things as ordinary. Now they felt different. The next morning, I walked through the east hallway where old family portraits lined the walls. The faces stared back at me from another era. Generations of Harrisons. Successes. Failures. Secrets. I stopped in front of one particular portrait and suddenly remembered a dinner from nearly 20 years earlier. A question had been asked that evening. A simple question. The room had gone silent. Someone quickly changed the subject. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now I understood why. By afternoon, Isabel was hosting another gathering in the library. She stood near the fireplace, speaking confidently about investment plans and future renovations. Everyone listened. Even David seemed relieved whenever she took control of a conversation. I watched quietly from across the room. The more I studied her, the more details resurfaced. Every important document somehow passed through her hands. Every sensitive discussion eventually included her opinion. Every unexpected change in family affairs seemed connected to her in some small way. Yet she never appeared responsible. That was what made her dangerous. Ethan entered carrying several folders and paused when he noticed me watching. He walked over and lowered his voice. "Grandma, are you all right?" I smiled gently. "Just thinking." He nodded, but I could tell he was unconvinced. Ethan had inherited something rare in this family. Curiosity. He paid attention when others looked away. Later that evening, as the sun disappeared beyond the trees. I returned to my room and continued reviewing the papers Thomas had given me. Near the bottom of the final folder was a reference number connected to an old bank account. Most people would have ignored it. I almost did. Then I noticed the date beside it. The account had remained active for decades. My heart sank, because if that account still existed, then someone had been maintaining the secret all along. The next morning I called Thomas before breakfast. I gave him the account number and asked him to find out whether it was still active. He did not ask questions. That was one of the reasons I had trusted him for so many years. By noon he called back. His voice was unusually serious. "The account exists," he said, "and it has been active continuously." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I simply listened to the silence on the line. Decades. Someone had maintained it for decades. "Can you tell who controls it?" I asked. Thomas hesitated. "Not yet. Whoever arranged this built several layers around it. But I found something else." He explained that regular transfers had been made over the years. Not large enough to attract attention. Not small enough to be meaningless. Just enough to keep something alive. Or someone. After the call ended, I walked through the estate gardens trying to clear my thoughts. Autumn leaves covered the stone paths. The fountain near the east lawn had been running since before David was born. Everything looked peaceful. Yet beneath that calm surface, the foundation of everything I believed about my family was beginning to crack. When I returned inside, I found Ethan sitting alone in the breakfast room reviewing documents on his computer. He looked up as I entered. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" he said. I nodded. He turned the screen slightly toward me. Several property records were open. "Have you ever noticed how often family assets changed ownership during the late 1980s? My heart skipped. I remained calm. "Why do you ask?" Ethan leaned back. "Because the paperwork does not make sense. Some files are incomplete. Some references lead nowhere. It is almost like someone cleaned the records." I studied him carefully. He was getting closer than he realized. Before I could answer, Isabel entered the room. Her smile appeared effortless as always. She asked Ethan about a charity event, complimented his work, and smoothly redirected the conversation elsewhere. Most people would have missed it. I did not. Neither did Ethan. After she left, he watched the doorway for several seconds. "That was strange," he said quietly. I simply smiled and poured another cup of coffee. Later that evening, Thomas sent me a scanned document he had uncovered in an old archive. The moment I opened it, my stomach tightened. At the bottom of the page were two signatures. One belonged to the person I expected. The other belonged to someone I never imagined would be involved. I spent the next 2 days studying every page Thomas uncovered. The second signature refused to leave my mind. At first, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. A misunderstanding. A clerical error. But deep down I already knew the truth. The signature belonged to Victoria. For years she had presented herself as a distant relative whose involvement in family affairs was limited to occasional advice and carefully timed opinions. Yet there she was, her name attached to transactions connected to the missing records. The realization unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. Victoria had always preferred operating from the shadows. She rarely argued, rarely demanded attention. She simply appeared whenever important decisions were made and disappeared before anyone asked too many questions. Looking back, I could see the pattern clearly. The following afternoon, I invited Thomas to the estate under the pretense of reviewing trust documents. We met in the old library, surrounded by shelves that had not changed in decades. Rain tapped softly against the windows while he spread additional papers across the table. Together we began connecting dates, signatures, transfers, and property records. Every document seemed to lead back to the same period. The late 1980s. The same years connected to the photograph hidden behind the wall. The same years connected to the name erased from family history. By evening, the pieces were beginning to form a picture. Not a complete picture, but enough to reveal intent. This had never been an accident. It had been a coordinated effort. Someone had spent years reshaping the official story while everyone else accepted the version placed in front of them. Later that night, I passed through the dining room and noticed Ethan sitting alone at the long oak table. Several folders lay open before him. He looked up as I entered. "Grandma," he said carefully, "have you ever felt like people were protecting a secret by pretending it never existed?" The question caught me off guard. I sat beside him and studied his expression. He was no longer guessing. He had found something. "Why would you ask that?" I replied. Ethan slid a document toward me. It was a property ledger. One page had been removed years earlier, but traces remained in the indexing system. Enough to prove the missing page had existed. Enough to prove someone wanted it forgotten. Before I could respond, a sound echoed from the hallway. We both looked up. Isabel stood near the doorway. She smiled warmly. Yet for the first time, I noticed something behind her smile. Concern. After Isabel left the dining room, neither Ethan nor I spoke for several seconds. The silence felt heavier than before. He slowly closed the property ledger and looked toward the doorway where she had disappeared. She knew what we were discussing, he said. It was not a question. I folded my hands and considered my response carefully. Perhaps, I said. Ethan frowned. Grandma, everybody acts like she is helping this family. But the more I look, the more things stop making sense. I could hear the frustration in his voice. It reminded me of someone else. Someone from many years ago who had asked similar questions before suddenly vanishing from family conversations altogether. That memory stayed with me long after Ethan left the room. The next morning, I woke to find a message from Thomas waiting on my phone. He wanted to meet immediately. An hour later, we sat together in a private conference room overlooking the harbor. He carried a worn leather briefcase I had never seen before. Without a word, he opened it and removed a thin folder. This belonged to your late husband, he said quietly. My heart tightened. I recognized the folder instantly. I had not seen it in more than 20 years. Where did you find it? I asked. Thomas hesitated. Harrison gave it to me shortly before his death and instructed me never to open it unless certain records resurfaced. For a moment, I simply stared at the folder resting between us. Harrison, the quiet man most people dismissed as an outsider. The man who sat silently through family dinners while others competed for influence. Suddenly, several pieces shifted into place. Thomas slid a document across the table. It contained handwritten notes made by my husband decades earlier. Notes about property transfers. Notes about missing records. Notes about people he no longer trusted. One name appeared repeatedly throughout the pages. Isabel. I felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. Not because her name was there, because the notes were dated years before she officially became involved in family affairs. Somehow, my husband had been watching events unfold long before anyone realized there was a reason to worry. When I returned to the estate that evening, the atmosphere felt different. Staff members moved quietly through the halls. David seemed distracted. Isabel appeared calm as always, but I noticed her making several private phone calls before dinner. Meanwhile, Ethan approached me near the staircase carrying a small envelope. This was left in my mailbox, he said. There was no return address. No explanation. Inside was a single photograph. The same face from the hidden picture. Except this time, another person stood beside them. And that person changed everything. For several minutes, Ethan and I studied the photograph in silence. Time had faded the edges, but the faces were unmistakable. The first was the same person hidden inside the image James had discovered behind the wall. The second face, however, left me completely stunned. It belonged to Thomas as a young man. Not the Thomas the First had known for decades as our trusted family attorney, but a much younger version standing beside the individual whose existence had been erased from family history. Ethan looked at me carefully. Did you know about this? He asked. I shook my head. No. And for the first time since this began, that answer was completely true. The following morning I called Thomas and asked him to come to the estate. He arrived just after noon. Outside, cold rain drifted across the property while dark clouds settled over the distant hills. We met in the library. I placed the photograph on the table between us. The moment he saw it, his expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Years of legal discipline prevented him from revealing much, but I noticed the hesitation, the recognition, the weight of an old memory returning. Where did you get this? He asked quietly. That is not the important question anymore, I replied. Thomas lowered himself into a chair and stared at the photograph. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I wondered if this day would ever come, he finally admitted. What followed was not a confession. Not yet, but it was the first crack in a wall that had stood for decades. Thomas explained that many people inside the Harrison circle had known fragments of the truth. No single person understood everything. Information had been divided, hidden, and protected. Some did it out of loyalty, others did it out of fear, and a few did it because the truth threatened their position. One of those names, unsurprisingly, was Isabel. That evening, the entire family gathered for dinner beneath the chandelier. Harrison remained silent at the far end of the table. David appeared exhausted. Isabel carried herself with the same effortless confidence she always displayed. Yet something was different. She kept glancing toward her phone, toward the hallway, toward the front entrance, almost as though she expected someone to arrive. Halfway through dinner, James entered the room carrying a sealed envelope. Without a word, he placed it directly in front of me. On the front was a single handwritten sentence. "Eleanor, if you are reading this, then they finally know I existed." The room became perfectly still. Even the faint clink of silverware disappeared as everyone stared at the envelope resting in front of me. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It matched the notes hidden inside the photograph. It matched the signature that had appeared throughout the forgotten records. My hands remained steady as I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. Across the table, Isabel watched carefully. David looked confused. Ethan leaned forward. Harrison sat motionless at the far end of the oak table, his expression unreadable. I began reading silently. The letter had been written decades earlier by the person whose existence had been erased from family history. Line by line, the truth emerged. There had never been a disappearance. There had never been a scandal. There had only been a deliberate decision made by powerful people who believed the family name mattered more than the truth. Assets had been redirected. Records had been altered. Relationships had been rewritten. Entire chapters of history had been hidden away so future generations would never ask questions. Yet the writer had anticipated that one day the truth would surface. That was why the photographs existed. That was why the documents survived. That was why the letter had been preserved. When I finally lowered the pages, nobody spoke. Thomas quietly entered the dining room carrying a leather folder. Behind him stood Sophia. She placed several certified documents on the table. The evidence was complete. The hidden account, the missing property records, the archived correspondence. Together they told the same story. Ethan looked from one document to another, slowly realizing how much had been concealed. David appeared stunned. Years of assumptions were collapsing in front of him. Isabel attempted to speak, but the confidence that usually defined her seemed diminished. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Then something unexpected happened. Harrison stood. Every eye in the room turned toward him. In a calm voice, he explained that he had known fragments of the truth for years. Not enough to expose it. Not enough to understand everything. But enough to recognize that someone had been protecting a lie. He had spent decades waiting for proof. Now it sat on the table for everyone to see. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, the weight of the past finally settled over the room. Nobody shouted. Nobody argued. The truth did not need help. It simply existed. I looked around the dining room, at the portraits, the chandelier, the familiar faces, and I understood something important. They thought they had buried the truth. What they really buried was time. And eventually, time always finds its way back.